Hello, everyone. This is Advocate Dr. Sheetal Babar, an advocate by profession, a researcher by hobby. Today, I shall be discussing a significant topic under research. Usually, students come to me and ask me, Ma'am, exactly what is the process for a research to begin? Is there any chronology? Are there any steps to be followed while we begin with the research? Yes, there are certain steps. There is a chronology of these steps to be followed in a research process. The foremost step to begin a research is to identify the research problem. What usually a researcher does is he or she begins or starts a research directly through the area of his or her interest before identifying the research problem, before identifying the gaps which are existing in that particular topic or title. There is a simple process to begin a research with this foremost step, that is to identify or locate a research problem. To locate a research problem, you actually have to identify the area of interest, you have to identify the topic, you have to identify the title, or rather, coin a title before you start your research. And this entire process comes in the very first step of identifying the research problem. But how do you identify this research problem? Unless you read something about it. So, the second step, once you identify the research problem, now you have to evaluate the literature that is existing or that is available for you to read. Once evaluation of the literature is done, what do we mean by evaluation of a research? This is the very beginning of your research, an initial stage of your research. So, is it possible to evaluate the entire literature? Probably not. But you can have a glance over the existing literature. You can segregate, categorize the literature, which is more important or most significant for your research problem, and you can evaluate. Once you evaluate the research, once you evaluate the literature and you know the research problem, you've located the research problem, now it is easy for a researcher to frame or formulate hypothesis. What a hypothesis? Hypotheses are mere statement which can be proved or disproved at the concluding state or stage of your research. So, formulating hypothesis is to identify your scope, limit your scope, and once you know the entirety of your research, formulate a statement which includes every single part of your research. This statement shall guide you as your hypothesis. Third step of hypothesis, once is achieved or reached by a researcher, then comes actual designing of your research. I would rather say first three steps of research are preparatory steps. You read, and read. Then you locate the research problem. Then you collect the data, which is initial data. And then you evaluate that data. And then you come upon a hypothesis. So this is preparatory stage. Now the actual research begins from your fourth step, where you have to design your research. What do we mean by designing your research? Now you have to identify what methodology will you use, what methods shall be utilized by the researcher to reach the conclusion, recommendations, and suggestions for the research. So once you have the entire design in your mind, how much time do you need? What exactly method, what exact tools, what techniques shall be utilized by the researcher? Once the researcher locates all of these things, then comes another significant stage, which is describing the population or it is identifying the samples. You need to have a population. You need to have variables, the major, the minor variables. wherein you can actually compare the major minor dependency of these variables upon each other. Usually, we categorize variables into two, one is dependent and another is independent. The dependent is the one which actually contributes to the independent variable. For example, if I am doing a research in rights of women, specifically with reproductive right of women. Now, in this particular research, reproductive right of a woman shall be independent variable. And what will be the dependent variable in this context? The dependent variable shall be all the social factors which contributes either to enhance the right of women or to derogate the right of women, etc. So these are two variables. What shall be the population? Women shall be the population in this entire research. Women in particular, because I have to limit my scope. So probably women in particular age, reproductive age, shall be my population. There might be some other experts, samples which will come into scene, like experts, like doctors, like psychologists, like sociologists, etc. So that is where I have to describe the entire population that shall contribute to my research. Once you have overcome this fifth stage, then comes the sixth stage where you actually start the fieldwork. So, what do I mean by starting up or beginning with the fieldwork is to collect the data. There might be various data upon which the researcher shall be dependent, such as primary data. What is primary data? If I'm researching into reproductive right of a woman, my primary data shall be a questionnaire put up for the experts, for the doctors, for the psychologists, for the sociologists, for the caretakers, for the staff, medical staff, which is probably the family members as well. I might interview few experts. So, interviewing results, answers, affirmations, negations by these experts and doctors and NGO staff, probably, or those who are contributing to this arena of population, shall be my primary data. Secondary data might be books available, articles, magazines, newspapers, etc. So I have, as a researcher, now the duty to collect the data. Once the data is collected, we all know what comes next. Post data collection is analyzing that data which has been collected. In fact, I must say, before analyzing the data, segregating the data is most important because you shall be having various parts of your research. If it is PhD research, or if it is article writing as a research, or if it is a paper submission as a research, you have various parts. For PhD, you have chapters, you have to chapterize. For your article, you have to part up your article into various parts. For paper presentation, you have to have again your paper to be categorized into parts. So depending on all of these parts, you have to first segregate the data and then make the data analysis of the entire data which has been collected by you. And now comes the last stage of your research process, which is writing down your research. If it is PhD research, start or begin to write your thesis because you have research problem, you have evaluated the literature, you have created the hypothesis, you have described and studied the population as per which you have collected the data, and you have analyzed the data. So if it is a PhD research, start writing thesis. If it's an article, start writing an article. If it is mere paper, start writing a report upon your paper, and so on. So, in general, to go to the basics of a research, you have these simple 8 steps of research. First is identify the research problem. Second is to evaluate the literature. Third is to create the hypothesis. Fourth is to design the research. Fifth is to describe and explain your population. Next, which is sixth step, is data collection. Seventh comes analyzing of data, and last, which is eighth stage, is report writing. So thank you so much. And especially I here want to thank this poor college and specifically Professor Shikha Rekha ma'am to give me this opportunity to contribute a little from my side to all of those researchers around the world. Thank you so much.